And Vice Presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance joins us now. It's so great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here. So I was saying to Bill at the top of the show, at this point in the cycle, you see which campaign is trying to win the news cycle. And I would say President Trump certainly won it yesterday, and that continues today because this trip to McDonald's was creative, it was fun, and it's gotten a ton of views, not just on television, but all over social media. There is another way to look at it, though, and this comes from some of the mainstream media headlines, sir. Rolling Stone, Trump makes fries at McDonald's in bizarre attempt to troll Harris. Washington Post, that Trump serves McDonald's fries to supporters in a stage-managed campaign stop. And NBC News says Trump attempts to troll Harris by serving fries at a Pennsylvania McDonald's. That last one's not so bad, but a stage-managed campaign stop. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, I actually went to a sports bar outside of Lambeau Field yesterday before the Packers game. Of course, the Packers won. And, you know, I was pouring some beers for people there at the bar, and I felt pretty good about myself. And then I saw all these news headlines about Donald Trump at McDonald's. Yeah. And I called him. I said, sir, you showed me up here because I was serving beers, you were serving fries. And I think that he really did win the news day. And the fact that these people are accusing him of a stage-managed thing, of course, the president has to have security because there have been 2 attempts on his life in the last 8 weeks. He can't just walk into a McDonald's and you know, sign a W-9 and actually go on the payroll. That's just not how this works, especially given the security threats on his life. But look, he was interacting with people. He was talking to the employees. He was giving people food. And he was just being, I think, what he does best, which is just being among the people, talking to them about what they care about. He showed, I think, genuine interest in the employees and their lives and where they came from and what they were actually doing in their job. And that's something you can't stage and you can't fake. That is just the genuine person that Donald Trump is. And it's why I think a lot of working people, even though, of course, he's a successful real estate billionaire, have this emotional connection to Donald Trump. You can't make up that kind of connection. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris has tried and failed. And I think it's why her campaign is flailing a little bit right now, is because she goes into Sheets and does 4 takes of her buying Doritos. Donald Trump just goes into McDonald's and he is who he is, and people love him.
What is your campaign's position, or even your position? Did she work at McDonald's as a student in college, or was she lying?
I don't know if there's a campaign position on it. What I find, and I've spoken to Donald Trump about this, what we find weird about this is that Kamala Harris has been able to produce no evidence that she worked at McDonald's, and she didn't even talk about it until 2019 during, I believe, her first run for the United States Senate. So I don't know what's ultimately true here, but it's interesting where the media will try to nitpick and micromanage every single thing that me or Donald Trump has said, and yet they just buy into this narrative from Kamala Harris that she invented 5-6 years ago. Why don't they just do some journalism? Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but I know I don't trust the media's lack of curiosity about this issue when they're so curious and nitpicking everything else that the Republican candidates do.
There was a sea change last week that we noticed. It was towards the end of the week in 2 of the battleground states, in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. The 2 senators there, the Democrats, who are the incumbents, they are in tough races. Bob Casey, Tammy, Baldwin. All of a sudden, they had somebody new in their ads. Watch here.
Casey bucked Biden to protect fracking, and he sided with Trump to end NAFTA and put tariffs on China to stop them from cheating.
Tammy Baldwin got President Trump to sign her Made in America bill.
So now they're trying to be closer to Trump, but here's some stats. This is from the last congressional cycle. Casey voted with Biden 98.5% of the time and Baldwin 95.5% of the time. So are they seeing some writing on the wall that they need to figure out a way to get away from Biden-Harris?
Yeah, Dana, let me say 2 things about this. First of all, what Bob Casey is saying is just not true. I've served with Bob Casey. He has been a down-the-line partisan Democrat during his entire time. He didn't actually defend Pennsylvania manufacturers, which is why I think Dave McCormick is ultimately going to win that race. But the politics of this are fascinating because you noticed Dave McCormick and Eric Hovde, they're not running ads about how much they agree with Kamala Harris. It's the Democratic candidates who are running ads about how much they agree with Donald Trump. I think it suggests that what we've seen in our polling for weeks, what I think Kamala Harris has seen in her polling for weeks, is that Kamala Harris's policies just aren't popular. So people are trying to run away from it as much as they possibly can. This is a person, Kamala Harris, who cast the deciding vote on trillions of dollars in new spending, who signed on to the open border policies of the last 3.5 years. Now she's trying to run as a change agent. Kamala Harris is more of the same. She governed that way. We will get even more of the bad policies of the last 3.5 years if we promote her to president. It's why I think the American people are going to make Donald Trump the president of the United States in just 2 short weeks.
I was following a couple of interviews over the weekend and also throughout the past week. He keeps coming back. He's asked about these enemies within comments. And I've read all of it. I've listened to all of it. It's hard for me to know what he really means about it. But that's not my question. My question is, why is it necessary?
Well, Bill, first of all, Donald Trump is unfiltered. I think this is one of the reasons why the campaign has gone well, is because he's not doing a basement campaign strategy. He's not just running on slogans. When people ask him questions, he speaks from the heart. And sometimes that means he's going to talk about issues that the mainstream media isn't focused on. But I think Americans are asking themselves, when we had these terrible riots in the summer of 2020, 20 people died, $13 billion in property damage, why wasn't law enforcement empowered to put down these riots, to reimpose law and order on American cities? That's, to me, what President Trump is talking about here, is that when you have local officials, when you have local rioters burning down American cities, when you have folks like Tim Walz encouraging rioters to go after local police stations, you need to have a federal response that reimposes law and order in this country. That's how I understand his comments is, look, we've obviously got some very important enemies to focus on overseas, but if people are burning down our cities, then of course we have to have a police response to that very basic violation of our right of public security.
He mentioned Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi by name in this case over the weekend.
Yeah, Bill, well, look, I mean, you have Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi who have been really part of weaponizing the Department of Justice against our country. I think what Donald Trump is saying is, look, we are the strongest country in the world. We've got the best people in the world, but we do have some broken leadership. We have people like Nancy Pelosi who's getting rich off of insider stock trades, even as our own country has gotten poorer, who's obsessed, Nancy Pelosi is obsessed with Donald Trump, not with reimposing policies that are going to deliver peace and prosperity for the American people. And of course, like I said, we do have people on the left, not most people to be clear, but some people on the left who are encouraging violent responses to what we believe is going to be a Donald Trump victory in a couple of weeks. That's not okay. And I think it's totally reasonable for the president to point out that, yes, we've got the strongest country in the world, but we do have some broken leaders in Washington. It's why we're running this race.
I wanted to ask you one other thing. Kamala Harris has been rolling out new policies as we get towards the end of the campaign. And one of them is about elder care. And a lot of people are dealing with this, trying to figure out how to take care of their parents, going through all the paperwork, all the regulations. There's not enough people to take care of them, etc. Here's her take on what she wants to do.
So my plan is to recognize this is about dignity and to say that should not have to happen in order for you to have help to take care of an elder. We're going to have Medicare cover it. And I think about this issue also in the context of people who are in the sandwich generation. And that's what we call people who are taking care of their young kids and their parents.
Bad idea. How would we pay for it?
Well, first of all, Dana, the most important point here is, why isn't Kamala Harris doing this now if it's such a good idea? She's the sitting vice president. The Democrats control the Senate. The entire campaign of Kamala Harris has been to throw out ideas that maybe sound good on paper, but then you ask yourself, why isn't she actually doing this with the power the American people have given her, the responsibility they've given her? And you realize it's all slogans. It's meant to appeal to people, but there's no actual governing agenda or policy detail behind it. That is the theme of Kamala Harris's entire campaign. Of course, we want to make it easier for elderly Americans to get the care that they need. I think there are a lot of bureaucratic loopholes and bureaucratic barriers to actually making it easier for young American families to take care of their elderly friends and elderly family. We, of course, want to deal with that, but you can't say, as the sitting vice president, you've got a great plan. If it's such a great plan, she should be doing it now.
Sir, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming. coming on. Hope to talk to you again before the big day. Quickly, just need a quick answer. You guys are looking at internal numbers all the time. How do you feel about where you stand right now? Are you winning? Are you losing? Or is it a dead flat tie?
Bill, I don't like the polls when we're winning. I don't like the polls when we're losing. I think our message to the American people is very simple. Get out there and vote. I feel very good about where we are. The internal numbers are great, but I choose to disbelieve them and believe instead in the American people's grit and hard work. Get out there and vote. Get your friends and family to the polls. We have got to swamp the vote in this country and get a margin that is so big that we're going to call it early on Tuesday night. But the only way that's going to happen is if people get out there and make their voices heard.
Thank you again, sir. We'll talk down the road. J.D. Vance, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.